Okay, welcome to lesson 5. We're going to get started today in the jig. Time to get pedal to the metal, so to speak. The knife we're going to do, M-Tech 2015 model, 6 millimeters thick. As you can see, it's a pretty thick blade, which is good for this purpose. This is called a Tonto edge. It's got a straight, an angle, and a straight, around 45 degrees. So pretty standard sharpening. We're going to sharpen this one to about level of a surgeon's scalpel. So let's begin. First thing, have all your equipment out, as I said in previous episode. Got my Gatco kit. First thing, get the jig out of your kit and get it ready. We're going to mount the knife and the jig. Because this is a thicker model, 6 millimeter, I've got my standoffs in here so I can do thicker jobs. Just out of habit, I always go what I call point right. You can see where your knobs are here. I always put it in the jig with the point to the right so I can remember in the future if I have to rejig this knife for any reason, everything will line up again. Some people always go point left. Really doesn't matter either way, just be consistent and you'll see why later. Best thing to do when you're lining up your jig, every knife's different, every blade's different. You want this jig to have a good bite on the flat surface of the knife. Put it in the jig, line it up. You see the flat surface right here. This is a curved machine edge, so I want to line it up on the flat surface. Crank down the screws till you have a bit of a wedge like that. And then start cranking down your counter screw so you get this fulcrum effect, which tightens up. See, it's getting wider as I crank that down. That tightens it up. That wedges it in. You need to be pretty finger tight. You don't want this thing to come off at all when you're sharpening. You need to be very firm the whole time you're sharpening. You can see I'm lined up right here, right along this machine edge, right along that machining edge. Everything works out pretty good. Make sure it's really tight. You can crank it down pretty tight. Don't worry about it. These Gatcos are built to handle that. Very important step here, intent. Anytime I'm sharpening someone's knife, I always ask them, what do you plan to do with this knife? Is this general use, kitchen use, cardboard, wood, whittling, whatever? The intent of the knife determines the angle right here. Generally 25 degrees up, 30 degrees and plus is for cutting cardboard and wood and heavy stuff. 20 to 25 degrees is general use, pocket knife, general cutting. Anything below 20 degrees is getting into really fine kitchenware, thin edges, scalpels, X-Acto knives, all the way down to 11 degrees, 15 degrees, shaving razors, straight razors, things like that. But for today, this knife is going to be a general use pocket knife, carry on your job, whatever. It's a real heavy gauge knife, which is great for this purpose. We're going to go 25 degrees. You see right here, 25 degrees, that's the hole we're going to use on the jig sharpening this knife for this purpose. Later we can do, we'll do, as I mentioned before, a primary, secondary, tertiary bevel. But our first facet, single 25 degrees, which is going to take some time to clear off this bad machine edge. Everything's in tight. It's not coming loose. Our intent's going to be 25 degrees. We're going to have a 25 degree facet, both sides. I've got my carrier post out here, as I mentioned before, so I can work. Everything's in the post, ready to go. My oil, I always use the same heavy mineral oil, which is great. That's ready to go. And then we need to get back into our kit. Anytime you start a sharpening job from scratch, you need to start with your most coarse stone. You may have a diamond, you may have a coarse 120, a coarse 80, a coarse 180. I'm using a coarse 120 here. Gatco, I have a coarse diamond also, but I'm using it for a different job right now. So we're going to start with a coarse 120, our coarse stone right here. We're going to line everything up and start the sharpening shortly. First thing you need to do always, make sure you have a wet stone. You can see a little bit of shine on there. That's not enough. Put about a 2-inch bead across it like that. Just use your fingertip. Make sure it's shiny all the way across. It's got plenty of oil on it. That starts soaking in while I'm getting everything else ready to go here. And next, lesson 6, we're going to start sharpening.